Welcome everyone here and virtually. It's great to have you all here. I'm Mary Schneider Enriquez, who until last summer was the Houghton Curator of Modern Contemporary Art at the Harvard Art Museums, which is where I've had the privilege over several years of working with the curator of this exhibition that we are going to be learning more about, Chassidy Winestock, and her show, A Female Landscape and the Abstract Gesture. And I think that I want to say on a personal note, having worked with Chassidy, having thought about what she has been with her, has been so committed to, it is so exciting to be here on campus to celebrate what her research and her passion and her vision has brought to life here at Radcliffe. And today and tonight, we're going to have an even more vivid sense of that with the extraordinary dialogue and discussion she will have with one of her artists, Maren Hassinger. So I will jump right into talking a little bit about the two of them. But before I go any further, this all came to be in huge part because of the belief in Chassidy and her ideas by Meg Rotzel. And I have to thank Meg personally because all along the way, she and I would talk about what Chassidy was doing, but it was really Meg thinking this idea, this part of Chassidy's dissertation could be an extraordinary show and very well suited to this setting and the incredible academic dialogues that come out of it. It came to fruition, and we're going to learn more tonight. So thank you, Meg. Thank you, Radcliffe. And thank you, Chassidy, for having me be your moderator tonight. So Chassidy and Maren. As I said, the show actually is several artists in the female gesture, so it includes Mildred Thompson, Howardena Pindell, Liliana Porter, and Maren Hassinger, who we were going to hear more from tonight. And I think anything I say will be too brief about her, but we all want to really hear the two of them talk. Just a little background on Maren. For over 5 decades, artist and educator Maren Hassinger has continued to develop a wide-ranging artistic practice spanning multiple media. She's worked in sculpture, in printmaking, installation, drawing, performance, and video, and with a wide variety of materials, including branches, leaves, newspapers, pink plastic bags, concrete, and her very famous wire rope. Hassinger's practice has been marked notably by intense meditations on issues of equality, broadly speaking, and by her examinations of the tensions between the natural and the industrial. Her work also provides important templates for the contemplation of our relationship as viewers and participants to space and place. She was born in Los Angeles, California in 1947 and began taking dance at a very early age, which is really important to thinking about her practice as a whole. This early training and the more advanced training that followed has continued to influence her practice in the visual arts, a practice concerned with registering images as it is reminding us of the importance of our bodies in movement in 3 dimensions and to our imaging of the world. Namely, her practice expands upon formalisms to arrive at an encompassing method and process. She is exhibited widely in the United States and abroad and has works in numerous collections, including the Whitney, the Museum of Modern Art, the Walker, the Art Institute of Chicago. And in the last 5 years, she's been commissioned to make work for the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden, Rockefeller Foundation, and currently has a work installed at Dia Beacon and on the terrace at the Art Institute of Chicago. So her work over these years continues to grow, continues to be an important presence, and we're going to learn more about that tonight. Originally educated at Bennington College, she received her BA, and then later her MFA from the University of California, Los Angeles. And for 2 decades, she also taught, was the director of the Reinhardt School of Graduate Sculpture at the Maryland Institute College of Art, and she is now based in New York. Chassidy Winestock, many of you may know, and if you don't, I look forward to having you get to know her better tonight. She's a historian of modern and contemporary art and is currently completing her PhD in the Department of the History of Art and Architecture at Harvard. Her dissertation centers on the work of Mildred Thompson, Howardena Pindell, Maren Hassinger, and Liliana Porter during the 1970s. Winestock has served as a graduate student intern in the Modern Contemporary Art Division of the Harvard Art Museums, where I had the opportunity to work closely with her on an exhibition in particular called Crossing Lines, Constructing Home, Displacement, and Belonging in Contemporary Art. And her writing has accompanied several exhibitions and works by modern and contemporary artists. And in 2021, she contributed to phase 1 of the Harvard Art Museum's Reframe Initiative. She earned her JD, so she's a lawyer as well, from the University of Michigan Law School and received a BA in Literary Studies from the University of Texas, Dallas. She has worked as an attorney and also as an educator, as well as teaching courses at Harvard. So it is with great pleasure that I now welcome Chassidy and Maren to join me on stage, please.
Mary, thank you so much for that amazing introduction. Thank you. Maren, so happy to have you here.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's really quite the pleasure, and I think the audience is in for a fantastic conversation. Been talking a lot over the last few months and over the last couple of days, and I think that you being here is such an incredible addition to the exhibition, just to get to focus in on your work and all of the wonderful things that you've done. And I want to begin by going way back. So I want to begin with Bennington and talking a little bit.
Far back.
Yeah. Oh, well,
Well, maybe for them.
Yeah. But, I've just enjoyed being able to talk to you more about that. A lot of scholars and writers have really focused in on this period of your trajectory and how fundamental it was, especially with regard to, issues of rejection, really, and figuring out how to move through, despite being told no a few times. And so I'd love to hear you talk about that, those very early years in college, and that educational trajectory, and kind of, where it brings us to today.
Well, that was 1965 through 69. And Bennington College was an all-women's college with a few men in the drama department. And my teacher was Isaac Whitkin, who had come from abroad, and he had been part of that whole school of Anthony Caro and others. And he asked us the first part of class, this is now at Bennington, and to make this head, make this head out of clay. It's like the beginning thing you do in a sculpture class. And so I made this head, and he loved this head. And there was an assistant, Jim Wolfe, who helped with everything, but he was also almost like a student. He was also learning. And so when Isaac said it was, good, and he mentioned it to Jim, Jim said, oh yes. But I wasn't convinced by Jim at all. But anyhow, so I started the class. I continued to do okay in the class. I stayed with the class. The next thing I knew, it was 4 years later, and it was time to graduate. And I did, a big sculpture installation with several pieces, maybe 4 or 5 or 6 pieces in this area that they had set aside for graduating seniors. And it came out good, I have to say, it looked nice, it looked professional. I was shocked, and then I graduated. Okay, and then I decided, what am I going to do, with my life? And I decided, My dad was an architect. I seemed to excel in like sculpture, so that seemed like something three-dimensional, you know? And so I went back to Los Angeles where I had, you know, come from to go to Bennington. And I applied to UCLA for a graduate degree in sculpture and they didn't accept me. So, I was not happy about that. But it happened that Bernard Kester was sitting there or something, and he, you know, like, he overheard who they were not accepting in sculpture, and he asked to have them, you know, if they didn't want me, he would, you know, kind of thing. So I ended up in something called fiber structure. I wanted an MFA, I wanted that degree, I wanted to teach, I wanted to spend the rest of my life as an artist and support at least 20 years of that life as a teacher. And it turned out Bernard was just the most wonderful, wonderful person. He was so supportive of me. And because I didn't know really anything about weaving, I never fell into any, you know, like overdone, already done, or done it all ever kinds of things. And I got real involved in right away doing things with rope, you know, regular hemp rope. And I would go around to junkyards and find it and stuff. And I'd come back and I'd make these giant, crazy, loopy things out of rope. I would take, like, for example, a knot you might find for some teeny-weeny little rope. And it was a macrame kind of knot. But I would take this giant rope and do that with it. And because of the scale difference, you know, it came out like, oh, that's something new, you know. It was not new. It was just scale. So, so I got a degree there, and everything was fine, and, you know, I really appreciated him, and I was happy I hadn't really taken the sculpture class because it turned out that it was very, you know, it was, you know, it was nothing to write home about. And it was too much involved with the current, you know, art form entries. So, you know, this is much better. And as you can see from the slide there, that's wire rope, and that's weaving. But you've never seen a weaving or a piece of wire rope like that. So right there, I could become, like, original without trying hard at all.
Yeah. You know, and I mean, I love this because it sets the stage for, like, all of those things that I like, we keep on going back to. You're like, oh, I was just doing. Mm-hmm. Like, I wasn't thinking about, you know, all of these things, but I think you articulate it so well, like that moment, right? Like, and all of the minutia of, like, how this came into being, like this early piece with wire rope. And I think that one of the things that's so remarkable, and what I like kind of like entering into this conversation with, is talking about the connections, like, that you have with the people who were, you know, so instrumental in the beginning, right? Like Bernard Kester.
He was just a loving person.
Yeah.
You know?
And so today, during the student lunch, like, you talked about interlock, and it was so incredibly beautiful because you were talking about how this material, right, enabled you to do something that was speaking to something in particular. You want to share with the audience a little bit more about what you were talking? Yeah. So, yeah, no. So, like, one of the questions was, you know, thinking about deriving meaning from, like, this action, this gesture that you're making. And it was such a beautiful meditation on what you were doing in interlock with the wire rope. Could you talk a little bit more about working with wire rope in particular, and the different ways that working with that material challenged you in some particular ways? Because it was a really beautiful meditation.
Well, if you've worked with any kind of fiber, this is fiber, everything's fiber. It is soft and giving, and you can manipulate it almost any way you want to. But if you come to a consideration of things that are actually fiber, just like this is fiber, but they're in a different construction, like rope, it's a whole different situation. And then if you take the idea of a rope, which is made out of hemp-like materials, which are natural materials, kind of drawn and divided and then twisted together again to make the rope, you can think about how, a material like this can also be a material that's strong and can, pull things and hoist things, and, you can jump rope with it and it's not going to fall apart, and, a lot of things. It has another capacity. Well, the wire rope was weird because although it seemed familiar because it was just like any other string or clothesline or anything you could imagine that's a piece of rope, but it was wire, which meant that, it wasn't going to get soggy if it got out in the rain. It could be manipulated in ways so that it could actually form images or sequences of images because it would, as a piece of wire, hold that position. So that's exactly what happened with interlock. I just had this a long piece of wire rope, and I suppose that it was probably about that much in diameter, which would be like maybe an inch in diameter. And I then just opened both ends and, well, what am I going to do with these both ends? So I just put them together. And it made that. It wasn't like it was, I didn't think it was anything, crazy intellectual discovery or anything. It's just, if you have a piece of rope like that, what are you going to do with it? You open the ends and then, well, what are you going to do with it? Well, put it back together and hang it on the wall, So, that's how that happened. But, Bernard was so sensitive to the whole thing, and he was so trying to move forward out of weaving on a loom and, and discovering new materials and everything. He was just joyous, So that, of course, encouraged me. If somebody's going to be joyous, you're going to, take notice and going to try to please them, And then, so I guess I just kept going,
Yeah.
I just kept going. And that's the thing is, I think that's a huge but very simple fact of life. If you're successful at something, just keep going. It could be any kind of something. You could be successful at cooking, at cleaning, at walking, at talking, at swimming. You could be, there's all kinds of things you can be successful at, but you just can't stop.
So I think this is a great point to stay with interlock, actually.
Oh, okay.
Because I want to hear you talk a little bit more now about it being placed in the room, right? There's the process of making, but then there's this work. It's about the size of a human body, which has been mentioned before, that is addressing the viewer in a particular kind of way. It's meant to be hung in the gallery, even though, like you mentioned, you've also, had public art installations with wire rope. It certainly can go in and out. But in the white cube space, right, at this particular point in time, it's hanging on the wall, kind of addressing the viewer in a particular kind of way, with something that, as you've delineated, is a sculptural material, like you've said before, you could bend it, you could weld it, but in this case, you were doing something different with it. I'd like to hear you talk a little bit more about two things, that, particular kind of a dress, like having it hang on the wall as this scale that's more like a human body, but then also get into talking about like space and place, right? Because as you have alluded to, like your father was an architect, and as we've talked about a lot, like this attentiveness to the object in the space with the viewer, right? Like, I'd just love to hear you talk a little bit more about that too. Like in addition to the process and the making of this piece and your wire rope pieces, like expand it out a little bit more.
So you're asking what did I anticipate the viewer was going to feel about my work?
Yeah. I mean, if you know, at all. Like,
Yeah.
but I've heard you talk very, like, thoughtfully and expansively, and very specifically about that in, you know, response to how we're all receiving the work.
Well, honestly, when I first set out to get this MFA, I thought, well, I'll be a teacher. I didn't actually think I would end up being like a practicing visual artist, although as an undergraduate, when I had to do my graduate show, it was also a pretty elaborate thing. And I had to make these large-scale pieces, and I had to set them outside, and I had to, you know, have a show and da-da-da. And then I got into graduate school, and being not accepted into sculpture per se, I thought, oh my goodness, now what? And then I find this wire rope, and I did this really simple thing to it. I bent a big piece of it on itself and wove it, because I was in a weaving class. So I had to, like, I couldn't, like, weld it all together because I was weaving. I had to weave. So I wove it. And I don't know, then I just kept going. I kept doing other things in the class and, having these experiences until I finally got out and I got my degree, and then I could do anything I wanted to do at that point. And at that point, I got kind of overwhelmed by all this wire rope business, and I haven't abandoned it really. And all the business of being a carpenter and putting pieces of wood together and painting them, which is an undergraduate I did a lot of, all of this stuff is very non-objective. It's not like images of people. I just said, oh my God, okay, all right, I'll be an artist. And okay, and I'll use the wire rope. And then proceeded attempts of mine to take the portfolio that I'd gotten from graduate school of works that I had done, to go around to various people, dealers, people who were on the other side of the art market, not the makers, but the sellers, to go around to these people and to, try to get them to be interested in my work so that I could live. And at the same time, realizing that because I had this advanced degree in this fine arts area, what I probably really needed to do was get a teaching job. And when I thought about that for a while, I thought, I do not want to teach necessarily in grade school or even high school. I would prefer teaching in a college situation. And, I started applying, and I was able to get this job at an art institute, the Maryland Institute College of Art. And it worked. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
I survived. And by this time I had kids that I was supporting, and we all survived.
Yeah, I mean, and we've talked about that quite a bit, because it's so incredibly, when I approach, my study of the object, I go in on the object first, and I'm with it for a long time before I even start to think about the person who made it, right? And that's where I was so excited to do this show, because I came to the point where I was like, it's all about the person who made it, right? Like all of these works are like leaving these traces on them, right? About like
it's a history.
Yeah. I mean, they're like almost like a map to follow, right? Like all the nails and the glue and this unraveling of the wire rope and putting it back together and and like one of the things
and the fact that the wire rope itself came into being because of the rejection about the sculpture department.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It never would have happened without rejection.
Yeah, and all of these things about your biography, right? That like for the longest time, like at first as like my research methodology, I'm like, oh, the object, but I'm like, how did we get here, right? And I think one of the things that like clicks for me as a student, I'm like, oh, she's using wire rope. Like she's using it to like do all these things that I'm learning about from this period in time that maybe have some resonances with minimalism and post-minimalism and seriality and repetition and like, this like repeated gesture, but that coming back to that, designating this material as something that I'm gonna contend with, like that's something that I just found incredibly compelling about your work, like in that moment. And so the other thing that I was getting at with the question is thinking about like dance and how integral that was, in addition to the fact that it was, a part of this story of rejection. It was it's also something that you were just so committed to, which is foregrounding motion and movement, right? So in a world...
And physicality.
Yeah, and physicality. So in a world where, the art object is addressing us, like in our visual world, right? Our optic world, like engaging us in that way. Like you were always so committed, it seemed, right? Even from early on with the performance in High Noon, like with the sculptural materials there, right?
Exactly,
like, I mean, you were always like continuing to go back to reminding us of this body, right?
Right. And this struggle.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, can you talk a little bit more about, and, I've been focusing like in the 70s, but, feel free to talk a little bit more about the importance of dance and movement and motion and this really, to put it in a very simple terms, right? You're not picturing a person. You're not doing a portrait.
Yeah.
But I think in so many ways, you're continually reminding us that there is always a body there, right?
Is there a slide you could show that might also bring this conversation further visually? Thank you.
Well, I'd have to say that there was a big physical fight going on most of the time. I didn't really have anybody helping me make those things. And they were put together because parts were unplied, because they're rope. They're plies of rope, wire rope, but rope. And so I would take the plies apart, and then I would figure out a way of kind of, just looping the plies together. And because it was such a heavy situation, they wouldn't pull apart. They were, they'd have trouble pulling apart. So the thing that's in the foreground, that's how I could make a circle of things, because I would take both ends of a length, or the length could be a straight length, or the length could be like a V length, because I used a little heat to make that V fold. But when I started to join all the parts together, they're just woven together like I'm weaving my fingers together. And because it was hard to pull them apart, just like it is really hard for me to pull my fingers apart like this. So then, we just developed, that was a thing. But then I would also, like in the picture, the photo, the thing in the background, and it's still in this photo. Yeah, that one on the left side. The water underneath is just lengths of a large wire rope that I unplied, and then I wanted to suggest water flowing beneath trees, branches. And I think that one's called Dry Flow. And I made that a really long time ago, and that still has significance for me because it so simply states, the situation we're in. We have this like dying nature, and then we have all this like man-made water, flowing by. And I don't know, it just seemed poetic, but appropriate,
Yeah, I mean, I was going to this image because I wanted to also drill down on this.
And then I had this whole dance thing in my head all the time. I really wanted to have been able to be a dance major in college, and I took a lot of classes from what used to be the Lester Horton dance company members. Lelia Goldoni was my teacher. And I never, was ever going to dance professionally, but I just loved it so much, and I took a lot of classes. And then at one point I found myself in my studio with a bunch of friends, and my ex-husband and my friend Louie, who was taking Tai Chi, and a few girlfriends, and we just put some music on, and I think my friend Adam, who was a fantastic photographer, took these stills while we were just joking around. And that kind of summed that period in my life, who my friends were, what we thought was fun, what the studio looked like,
Yeah. I mean, I love this image, and I keep on going back to it because I think, again, like so many people who study objects, we get so wrapped up in that static object, and thinking about it in that moment in time, right? Yeah. And so I think this image does so much work to, remind us of, the people, right? The connections, right?
The actual mobility of the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I also wanted to drill down on because I thought it was such a wonderful moment, when we were talking about the title of the show earlier, A Female Landscape in the Abstract Gesture. Mm-hmm. And we took it to kind of another place and talking about, again, issues of place, right? And I think that one of the things that is a running theme in terms of thinking about the context in which you developed your practice is the extent to which you were living in different places and you were moving around, and that was part of finding your way, right? And I think that it's so important that it runs through. It's a thread that runs through all of the stories of the people who are in the show. Is that the moving around, right? Getting to understand your place in a new place, right? Is all a part of this.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Yeah.
I'm being really ambitious about the project of being an artist and realizing that there are certain places that would make it hard to really achieve that ambition.
Yeah.
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 So that's when I moved.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, again, one of the things that I wanted to highlight during this conversation is something that was a seedling, right, in my thinking early on, but became so incredibly present once, I was getting towards the end of installing the show and all of that. I said, wow, the extent to which the biography, the connections, the attention to the person, could tell me so much, right? And so, of course, right? Yeah. But, not necessarily where you are, when you begin to, develop a research question, if you're somebody like me. So I wanted to talk about something that I just thought was so prescient and so incredibly important to drill down on too, which is I had this moment where your show called Process opened just recently, and I went to one of the programming events, and you were twisting newspaper with visitors.
Right.
And, I think that this is another moment like in your practice that is so incredibly important, which is, again, drilling down on this issue of the collaborative spirit, right? And being like open to allowing the viewer to have a particular place, right, when they come to the work.
Right.
And so you've done, women's work a couple of times, notably like at Spelman too in 2015, where, you create this work out of this collaborative experience. So I was wondering if you'd talk a little bit more about that, talk about it from early on or like recently, like the extent to which that is a part of like important to your practice.
Well, sometimes when there's an audience like this and we're in like an academic situation, and I really want to explain to them, like how I got involved with wire rope, and yet we don't have the wherewithal to have a bunch of wire rope laying around. How are we going to bend it? How are we going to weld it? What are we going to do? But we could take newspapers, we could strip down the various sections so that they came to be about that wide, and then we could take each individual strip and twist. We could, using a square knot, which is a nice, strong, even knot, put all of those twists together, and we could make a universe. Or we could make strands all over, hanging from all over. Or we could make a carpet on the floor. Or we could, we could do this. We could do a million things. And so sometimes when I go and I speak, we do those things. We could do those things here, but I don't think we brought the newspapers, right? No, we didn't. Well, next time, guys. You just escaped this time. Yeah, because, it's like the newspaper is everything that the wire rope isn't. I mean, you can't say, okay, it's not going to last. It lasts. It might get a little yellow around the edges, but it does last. And if you treat it properly, it'll last forever. And I think out of those periods I had when I was twisting newspaper with a variety of people in the audience, that I got the idea that I would, let's chuck this wire rope and just do the newspaper. It's so much more forgiving, so much more malleable.
Yeah. And I put up Retching News.
And it contains stories that concern all of us.
Yeah. I put up Wrenching News. Yeah, because I wanted us to also look at these shadows.
Oh, the shadows?
I mean, I just think that is amazing. Like, and, again, like the circle that, like, continues
to grow.
continues to grow,
Yeah.
changes depending on where you are in the gallery with it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think all of these things, like, continuing on from early on, like these considerations of, like, the viewer's place in that space, interacting with that work. Like, I mean, that's...
And also the temptation to talk about all of our stories being there because it's the New York Times, and that's the paper of record, and, it's not... There's something about the wire rope that's inherently threatening. It always looks like it's going to fall and grab you. But this just is kind of settled into itself. It has quietness.
Yeah.
It has if I may jump in for a minute, the newspaper has a sense of evocative and continual growth that you as the viewer, because one of the things I've been thinking about a lot of your work, and as you two have discussed it, is the relationship of the viewer to the actual work is one that it lends itself, even the wire rope. You get close and then you're this is threatening.
Right.
Where this, it's almost like those old shag carpets in the 70s, where you actually want to lay down in it and you want to touch it and you want to see how it's woven and it. But the words on each of those pieces of paper also draw you in. So you're experiencing it in various ways.
So it's like familiar. It's totally familiar. Doesn't hurt, doesn't cut. You're not going to die from a little ink on your fingers. It comes right off with some soap and water. It's a nice material. In time, it would yellow, but you could redo it.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't be missing anything.
Yeah. I mean, we also have some images too of pink trash and.
Yeah, and then I, got involved in thinking about things like in the pink trash situation, like, what's the complementary color to green grass, And of course it would be pink trash. So complementary meaning like they're on the color chart would be on opposite sides, and so if you put them next to each other, you would really see both of them better. And then I could be running around in my pink suit, and you'd really see me running around throwing all this pink rain everywhere. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, Mary, like, this practice that has come to be defined in large part by your wire rope pieces, right? Because they have so much visibility, but there is also like this other really rich part of your practice that involves leaves and the paper and the balloons.
It's very of the moment.
Yeah.
It's nothing that's supposed to last forever.
Yeah, and so like we were talking earlier about like this facility with multiple materials, right? Like when we were sitting in the gallery, like again, like Mildred's work and your work and Howardena, like this continual investigation of broader themes rendered through your investigations directly with these materials, and a real attentiveness to that, which is something that a lot of artists do, right? But
but some people are maybe more conservatively oriented, so they're not going to go get trash bags and blow them up, But I was like, hey, I like that pink. Let's do it. And then, also I would put love notes inside,
and the breath, right?
And the breath of blowing them up.
Blow them up.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, on that that kind of ephemeral temporal moment, I'm going to jump us to a different time, which is, we have a lot of audience members who really want to ask you questions. So I have a question from the broader audience. You spotlight the role of constraint in your process, but also the role of coincidence. Is intentionally choosing a constraint worthwhile or too artificial?
You mean like choosing to use wire rope and then finding I couldn't get it apart without...
Well, that is a kind of constraint. That's true. The question was open, so that's a good point.
Yeah, I don't think I made it particularly easy on myself, but I really was trying to be a sculpture major, and they did not accept me in their department. So this is what they get, It's like, screw them, I'm going to do it better. So then I get into weaving, and then I'm like, rope, okay. And then I find this other kind of rope, which is really wire, which I can do all this welding stuff and anything I want to do with it. I mean, it's as if I was back in sculpture class. Except that I have all this nuance of what happens when you use fiber. So it was like better. So forget that guy.
That's good.
Yeah.
New question. Did you regard the human body, which is a flexible structure, as a sculptural medium? in dance and other forms of expression?
Well, I think the body is our utmost expressive tool. And I think everybody uses it. You don't have to be a ballet dancer to do that. I mean, we all flip each other off, you know. And that's, you know, we all understand what that is. Or we all smile and everybody understands what that is. Or we all get giddy with laughter and double over. And everybody understands what those physical moments and movements are. Does that answer your question, or do I need to go deeper into how that relates to what I make?
Yeah, I think that there are a number of ways of thinking about the question because it was submitted online, but I think they're wondering, like, to what extent is it like intentional, I guess the word would be to like think about the role of the body in your work, right? Like, and the way it would register for a viewer.
Okay, what's intentional, maybe as I first started using wire rope, I didn't realize that there was going to be a fight with it. I was always going to be fighting with it. But then, as I went on and the fight continued, I mean, yeah, I guess you could compare it to like any fight, you know, like this is how we have to fight everything to get anything we want.
Yeah, because you keep on saying struggle.
Yeah, we have to struggle. You want it, it's not going to be easy. They're not going to give it to you. Mm-hmm. You know, you got to struggle. You got to like make it do what you need it to do, you know?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, on the level of working literally with the material, right? But then also, like, to what extent? Because a lot of the questions are going beyond that, right? Like, to what extent are you thinking about, you know, what we've talked about, moving, right? Mm-hmm. The choices that are being made because, you know, you've been told no, like, time and time again, right?
Yeah, like, well, there's anger, of course, which is a great giver of powerful energy. Anger will set you off on all kind of crazy paths. They don't have to be paths that are damaging to others, but they could give you the energy to do what you think you need to do to be good with yourself. I think it's very important to be good to yourself and with yourself, and that's happiness.
We're now at the point of the last question, so time is flying. Was weaving a meditative process for you at any point, or was it more like struggling with an external foe, based on what you said about wire? Or is it the beauty of both?
If you could have seen me at a loom cursing, God, you know, and how long it takes to warp a loom. And all those shuttle runs, you know, then you would understand why I turned to wire rope. I couldn't do it. I just threw my hands up. No, I can't do this. I cannot do this. It's a practice, you know, hand warping a loom and then sitting with that loom and making this fabric. No, it was too much. It was too much, and I was also, you know, struggling with this idea that I had this former background in three-dimensionality with sculptures that I'd made at Bennington, and you know, I just had to kind of move on, you know, and I think, you know, I'm so grateful to Bernard Kester. I wish he was still here, to, you know, allow me to be in that program so I could discover a way to support myself, you know, and to stay with art, which is the gift that I was born with, and to use that gift to share whatever it is, so you know, that we can all talk about it and maybe be somehow happier. So that's it.
Oh, well, thank you.
you,
Thank you
Maren.
both. That was just really wonderful. Wow. Thank you, Maren, for sharing that, and thank you, Chassidy, for sharing your great questions that had you opening up even for. I had the pleasure of 24 hours of listening to the two of you share a lot, and I've learned. It's really wonderful. And I'm grateful. This concludes our program today, and I just want to thank you both, as I just said, for giving us an opening and a window into thinking about the creative process and your history and both what you've lived and why you've done what you have. But also for inspiring us to know that this process, when you, as you said, when you're good at something or when you know you need to do it is a good message for all of us to think about. In today's world in particular, I will add. For those of you who are here with me in the audience, we encourage you to come see the gallery, the show, over in Byerly Hall, and it will be the extended hours until 7 o'clock tonight, so you'll have time to really look at the objects and hopefully have a moment with Chassidy and Maren over there. The exhibition is open until June 22nd. And we encourage, for those of you who are online, to register to visit A Female Landscape in the Abstract Gesture through the Radcliffe website. It's free and open to the public Monday through Friday, 12 to 4:30. And there's a beautiful catalog, I will add, that Chassidy created that goes with the show. So it's in many ways, you will experience it on site, but you'll take it home with you, and I will guarantee you'll continue to think about it. So. Thank you so much. This has been recorded, so you'll be able to see this again and revisit this on Radcliffe programming, radcliffe.harvard.edu. But above all, thank you for joining us, and thank you too.
Thank you, audience. You were lovely. And if you're an artist, don't stop. Do not stop.